Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community Bookstore's virtual event series. My name is Noah. I'm the event coordinator at the bookstore, and I'm thrilled today to welcome Atticus Lish for the release of The War for Gloria in conversation with Michele Filgate. While we're eagerly awaiting the return of in-person events, virtual ones like the one that you're about to see have become a very joyful thing for us. So I want to give a very special thank you to our guests for joining us tonight and for all of you at home for tuning in. Now to some housekeeping. You should be able to see and hear our presenters, but they cannot see or hear you. So if you have any questions, please click on the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen to submit them. We will be asking those at the end of the program, so please don't be shy. There's also a chat button through which I will be posting a link to buy tonight's book, which is of course very important. One caveat for tonight is that we're all at the mercy of our home internet connections and server loads, so please bear with any technical issues that might arise and we'll try to resolve them as quickly as possible. We've scheduled a whole host of summer and fall programming for you, so do head over to our website, communitybookstore.net, and sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date. One event in particular that I want to point out is next Thursday, September 16th. We're thrilled to welcome Sigrid Nunez for the paperback launch of What Are You Going Through? In conversation with Andrew Martin. That program is up on our website now and taking registrations. And finally, we've enabled Zoom's auto transcribe settings. So if your version of Zoom is up to date, hit the live transcription button at the bottom of your screen to enable closed captions. Now a little about tonight's guests and we'll get started. Atticus Lish is the author of Preparation for the Next Life, which won the 2015 Faulkner Award for fiction and the 2016 Grand Prix de Littérature Américaine. Michele Filgate is a contributing editor at Literary Hub and the editor of a critically acclaimed anthology based on her long reads essay, What My Mother and I Don't Talk About. Currently, she is an MFA student at NYU, where she is the recipient of the Stein Fellowship. Her work has appeared in Long Reads, The Washington Post, The Los Angeles Times, The Boston Globe, The Paris Review Daily, Tin House, Gulf Coast, and many other publications. So now, without any further ado, I'll hand it off to you, Atticus and Michele. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Noah, and thank you, Community Bookstore, for hosting this event. And thank you, Atticus, for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you about your incredible new novel, The War for Gloria. And I thought I'd start out tonight by asking you to read from it before we have a conversation.
Well, that sounds just great. And before I get started, I would like to say thank you to you, to Noah, and to the bookstore, and for all the folks who showed up. I appreciate you guys being here too, even though I can't see you. Here we go. So I'll just read right from the beginning. This is chapter 1, and it's entitled Woman, Earth, Sun, and Richard Feynman. You never think about nerves and breathing. You take breathing for granted. You take the nerves under your skin or under the skin of another animal for granted. His mother loved him. Gloria said, "You make me laugh." He had a sense of humor about their lives, apparently. She was a single mother, and he helped her collect her library off the streets of Boston and never complained about it. They went through crates of books together and shared what they found. Her boy was never bored, even living in her car. She came from Springfield, which she called her shitty little city. She had come to Boston to go to college. She wanted to stand on the shoulders of Germaine Greer, the author of Sex and Destiny. She gave birth to Corey at Mass General during what should have been her final year of college. She crashed in Cleveland Circle, Jamaica Plain, Mission Hill, just her and her son and her ever-changing roommates. For a time, they stayed at a triple-decker house in Dorchester, and he went to a school where a good half the other kids were from the Cape Verde Islands. Corey showed his mom the islands on the map, Boa Vista and Santiago off the coast of Senegal, telling her that he'd be sailing here someday when he grew up and went to sea. He had learned about the concept of a vessel from living in his mother's car. He had fastened on the concept early. Maybe it was always in his head, one of the basic concepts he was born with: woman, earth, sun, boat. Her full name was Gloria Goltz. In his mind, she was always a bright blonde. He saw her as having a glass jaw that she kept putting up, and it kept getting cracked. But when it came to him, she was stalwart. Once, she took him to a KFC, and the manager didn't want to give her another biscuit with her order, but she demanded it because Corey loved biscuits. He had read that sailors ate hardtack and salt pork, and the manager, with his thin arms and striped shirt, relented. Mom, you're always giving me things. You never ask for anything. Gloria and Corey cut the biscuits on their brown plastic tray and had them with butter and honey. Will you mind it when I become a sailor? Oh no, but I want you to be a smart sailor. I don't want you to be dumb. But will you mind it when I have to leave home? I'll have to accept it. I'll come back and visit. Voyages usually take about 3 years. Whaling voyages can take 7. There was a pattern between them of her getting blue and of him helping her. She got blue because of herself. She had not fulfilled the ambition she'd had at 17, smoking a cigarette in front of her concrete dorm building at Lesley College in the shadow of Harvard, in the literal shadow of its tombstone-shaped, ivy-covered law library, to think and write and shock the world, to condemn it, to synthesize all the available evidence, art, history, movies, negative images and messages in the media, her upbringing, her body in the mirror, her own thoughts, even the smallest thing down to the cigarette in her mouth, into a single scream of rage against the patriarchy. Instead, she'd been a waitress, a barmaid taking bottles off a counter after the bar was closed and the band was unplugging its amps and it was too late to do anything but sleep the next day away. And this had gone on for years, years of telling herself that she was finding her voice, that she was getting ready, years of reading, not writing, of groggy afternoons, a feminist book in her hands on the tea, Sex and Destiny, Doc Martens on her feet, reading at the Oban Pan, jumping up from her wire chair and standing on the red leather toes of her boots to hug the street musicians who drifted in with the pigeons, carrying guitars, wearing bowler hats and German army trench coats, the wet stink of the bathroom around the corner, and the weird men playing chess all day, the hobos from Seattle, skinheads in suspenders saluting in the street, a dyed mohawk the size of a circular saw blade from a lumber mill atop a gaunt, bald head, kids from the wealthy towns of Concord and Lexington exploring new identities as bitter waifs. At night, a wolf pack of multiracial youths from Dorchester, one a white boy wearing a shirt saying, "That funky Cypress Hill shit, there to sell drugs." Her skinny legs, she had dropped out of school. She had hung out in the pit at Harvard Square, sitting cross-legged in striped tights on the granite wall, her eyes mascaraed, her mouth painted black, debating with her fellow anarchists, giving the finger to the square, the bank, the bricks, the coup, the clock, the privilege and hypocrisy. The scream of rage was at herself. So sometimes, as the years passed, she'd look at herself and the weight of the time and the evidence of who she was would hit her and she'd get high and ask, will it ever be okay? And for some reason, her son would tell her, hey, Mom, don't be sad. You're great. You're greater than you know.
I loved hearing you read from that. And I completely fell in love with Gloria and her son, Corey, two of the main characters in this book, as I read this novel. And I know that we're talking about a novel tonight, but I know a huge part of this book, of this story, is autobiographical, in that you lost your own mother to the same illness that Gloria does. And I'm wondering what it was like to revisit such a painful time in your life and also be with her on the page again while writing this book.
Well, I can remember the situation very clearly, actually. I was sitting in the small room in the apartment that my wife and I lived in Brooklyn, in Sunset Park. Mm-hmm. It was late 2014, or perhaps early 15. And I knew I was going to write another novel. I had the writing desk in front of me, the computer in front of me. And I remember it very well. It was the evening. I had a light on. It was sort of a glowy little room. And I remember thinking, you know, if there's something that's close to the bone for me still, after the last book, which had just come out, it was my mother. And it actually sort of struck me that the first book I had written had been an evasion of the main subject. It's funny that I wrote prep, and it really wasn't the thing that had happened chronologically first. I mean, it referred to things that I'd had some passing experience of later in life. But the first story, and I guess the first story for everyone, is the primal story. So the story of the mother. So there it was, and that's what I began with.
That's so interesting you say that, because the evasion of the first story in your first novel, I know that in an interview that just came out in the Paris Review, you mentioned that The War for Gloria is essentially a prequel to Preparation for the Next Life. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that statement and explain why that is.
I can. Preparation for the Next Life, the way I feel about the book, is really a very simple formula. It's something like this. Look, I'm in love with a woman. You touch her and I'll murder you. Mm-hmm. Now, how it came about that I felt that way is an earlier story, and that's what The War for Gloria treats. So, I don't think I was, I changed during my mother's illness. I recall that. I recall that. I think I was I think it made me less cold. I read somewhere in Khalil Gibran that certain events can make it possible for you to have new perceptions. I think what he actually says is that, I don't know, this may sound a little sentimental or something. I don't want to talk about me, but it was like he says sorrow can hollow you out so you can feel more joy or something like that. But I do recall this. I know that when I was younger, I was a cold kid by my own standards. I think I don't know. I can even remember people saying to me, what's the matter with you? Why are you so hard? I wasn't. I know that I ended up feeling more about life and the woman and people I was in love with after my mom died. So that changed me, but I couldn't talk about it in the first book. All I could talk about was my protectiveness. But that came from somewhere. So then I had to go back and discuss it.
What made you able to finally confront that in this book? And also it's interesting that you said you talked about like getting to the bone and writing toward what hurts. Do you feel like you always have to do that when you're writing a book? Was that the case for Preparation for the Next Life as well?
Yeah, I don't want to waste the reader's time. I mean, I feel like, if possible, it would be good to write about something that really matters. And by the way, I feel like this, just because I'm writing a story doesn't mean I have any special qualifications. I mean, everybody must face the facts of life. There are people all around who are experts in life and have had a wider experience than I have. And so if I'm going to say something that will be widely interesting, it had better go down to the things that are close enough to the bone to be common to many people. So I think that's the reason for doing that. So that was why I set out to do it that way.
Yeah. So I read that you did quite a bit of research for this book, including you were working for a moving company in Massachusetts while you worked on revising the last third of the book. And so having spent a lot of time in the Boston area myself, I used to live in New Hampshire for many years, and I dated someone who lived in Somerville at the time. I was really struck by how vividly you captured the scenery there. How important is it to you to immerse yourself in the place that you're writing about?
Well, it's certainly important. It definitely helps to be able to paint from life. Um, it was a great help to me to be able to stay up at the Viking warehouse in Massachusetts when I was finishing, because I was just because I could fill myself with the look of the neighborhood.
Yeah. And what you had spent some time, you had lived there though when you were younger, is that correct? Or you went to school up there
Yes.
in Massachusetts?
Well, Massachusetts has been kind of a second home to me. I've gone back and forth to Massachusetts lots of times. I went to school. I went to prep school at Phillips Academy in Andover, Mass, starting in 1985. Then I went to college in Cambridge, Mass. Then after getting out of the Marines in 1997, I went back to Massachusetts with Beth, and was there for 2 years, and then was gone for a while, and then came back, and then continued to go back up there while researching the book. So all told, I've sort of been back and forth to Massachusetts lots and lots and lots.
Wonderful. Another autobiographical element in this novel is that you have a background in mixed martial arts, and that plays a role in this novel with Corey. What was it like to capture the physicality of those fights that you write so well on the page here? What was that experience like for you?
Well, that sort of thing was some of the most pleasant writing that came about while doing this, because for one thing, I actually went up to various fights and could sort of play junior journalist and write what I was seeing. And, I am a fight fan, so I liked to write what I was seeing. So that was all around pleasant. One of the best parts was that I got to write about a fight that I had seen years ago that had made a huge, huge, huge impact on me. A fight between a gentleman named Victor Hunsaker, and I don't know the name of his opponent, but it took place at the King of the Cage in about 2000. And it was a very, very, very dramatic sporting event. And it was the kind of thing that makes you think, long live sports, because you see heroism in a bottle. Victor went out there and very, very nearly didn't survive the first round, but at the very last few seconds actually managed to win by submission. And it was, it brought me to my feet. I was jumping up and down and screaming in the stands, and I really had no control over myself. It was a hell of an experience.
And are you still doing martial arts now? Is that something you still practice or no?
No, I'm not. When I first started writing this book in 2015, I had the good fortune to be going to a terrific martial arts gym, and I'd like to give them a shout out right now if I could. They're called Radical MMA, and it's run by a pal of mine who I respect a great deal. His name is Rene Dreyfus, and teaches a wonderful gym, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with his own stamp on it. And I enjoyed going there more than I can tell you. I had a great time. The problem is it started to suck me in, and I became concerned that I was going to lose my emotional energy to the wrong battle. And so I stopped, and I honestly tell you, it was a sacrifice. I would have liked to have gone. It made me feel very mentally healthy, and not to mention physically healthy. I felt well balanced, but I said, the real thing that I have to do is I have to write this book. I can't be dithering away my time rolling around, as much fun as it is. And I would think, I know Khabib Nurmagomedov isn't out there taking writing classes. He's in the gym, and I thought I should be in my gym. So I stopped doing it, but I did miss it. And now the funny thing is, over the course of writing the book, I really did change. I feel as if I aged several years and really entered middle age, and I feel it. And that's no disaster. I hope it's just a part of learning. But I have come out the other side of this not hot-blooded the way I used to be, and I don't actually miss rolling around or punching the bag or whatever. And so I'm content to not do it. And what I would like to do is devote my life to art.
I'm really glad for all of the readers' benefits out there that that's what you want to do, is devote your life to art.
I can say art, not martial arts, but yes.
Yeah. But also hearing you about how, you wanted to put all of your energy into this book made me think of a question I wanted to ask you, which is in relation to an interview you did with the writer Tobias Carroll for the Los Angeles Times. And you talked about with Toby about pushing yourself to a breaking point multiple times in the process of writing this book and having to pick yourself back up again. And the concept of endurance is really threaded throughout this novel. What with between Corey's struggle to take care of his mother, them just trying to survive, to afford groceries, to feed her as she becomes sicker and sicker, but also the endurance of training for his fights. And I'm wondering if endurance itself was a theme that you were consciously interested in exploring here.
I am consciously interested in endurance. I think it's the sacred virtue. One interesting thing about human beings is that they're built to run. We have a proportionately large heart. And if I have my facts right, I believe that early hunters would, their strategy for killing an animal would be to wound it and then to run it down over several days. So, and then if you think about what early human beings did with movement across continents, I mean, somebody had to come from Siberia and get across the Aleutian Islands and then walk all the way down through the Americas to populate Tierra del Fuego. I mean, so the great thing about human beings is that they keep going. So yes, I do think endurance is a sacred virtue. I was just, okay. So I'm writing a piece right now on the Jake Paul Tyron Woodley fight that just went down in Cleveland. And while I was there, I had the chance to run into Michael Bisping. I'm going to bet that maybe you don't know who Michael Bisping is, but some people will know. And what I was just telling my wife I love so much about him is that he got his retina detached in 2013, and he fought for 4 more years and won the world title along the way, and before he retired. There is something about that we all need to see. I think that I mean, that's what the sports fan loves to see. That's what, because life is an endurance test for everybody. You, me, I don't have a monopoly on it. But I salute it. And so, yes, it was foremost in my mind. Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to read that piece. Can you say where that's going to be published yet, or is that not?
Oh, yeah. I'm writing it for Harper's.
Oh, fantastic.
I haven't finished writing it yet. So now you've put the pressure on. I better do a good job.
Absolutely. I want to talk about toxic masculinity and how it's threaded throughout this novel. And I'm thinking particularly of how much Corey admires his friend Adrian at first for Adrian's physical strength. Adrian is so focused on chiseling his body, right? And then his intelligence. This is a friend of his who ends up going to MIT. But then I'm also thinking about how Adrian bonds with Corey's abusive father, Leonard. And I'm wondering whether it was challenging for you to write about misogyny and violence in such detailed and visceral ways. Was it, if it was at all challenging, what were the challenges of that? And what was it like to write about that in the way that you do so well in this?
Well, my inner comedian was going to reply something like, oh, it was easy for me because I enjoy it so much. I delight in misogyny. The more toxic the masculinity, the better. What's funny? I was driving on the highway out here. In case your audience doesn't know, I'm in Pasadena. I'm in the LA area. So I was passing somebody's van had in Spanish on the side, it said something like "Tengo novio toxico," which I think means I have a toxic boyfriend. And it's very curious that somebody would say that. And I wondered if it was a little bit like saying I'm an adorable deplorable. It was a little bit like saying, you know, there's another side to this. And you may call me deplorable, but there's something good about me. You may call masculinity, or I know you're not calling all men toxic, but you know, right. you may swipe at something, and some other people may be saying, well, we kind of like that. So I think there's nothing but gray areas here. You know, I must say, I have loved talking to you so far, and I don't know you that well, and I want to say this in all friendship, but I don't take this amiss. I don't love the term toxic masculinity because to my ear, it sounds a little bit like a swipe at too much. You know, you and I both know there are ways a guy can be a chauvinist jerk, and I know what that means, you know? So yeah, you know, I in writing about someone like Leonard or my Adrian guy, I think I think I enjoyed it because it's fun to write about crooks. It's fun to write about the devil. It's fun to write about bad guys. A good villain is tasty work for a novelist.
Absolutely. I love the quote unquote unlikable characters, and actually think the term unlikable characters is like kind of ridiculous because I know there's a lot of debate over that. But yeah,
Can I add one thing? Can I add one thing? But actually the book goes very, very dark towards the end.
Yes.
And no, that actually wasn't fun to write about. In fact, I felt almost embarrassed to put it in. Because you know, this came up a little bit with prep. I had somebody ask me about a particularly gruesome scene that I'd written in prep. Somebody said to me, you know, do you find this titillating? And so I'm always worried that people will think that what I'm really doing is smacking my lips when I'm discussing something. But there's another reason for talking about something, which is that you might find it disturbing, and therefore you have to get it off your chest. And that's usually been my experience when I look at, like, I went through a phase where I looked at crime footage a lot. You can find things on the web, obviously. I went to this website called LiveLeak, documenting reality, and you can see, you know, surveillance camera footage, raw footage of people killing each other. And I didn't watch these things with delight, far from it. When you see the real thing, my experience is you feel like you get punched in the stomach, and you may think about it for a couple of days and then kind of want to get it out of your system. So it wasn't all pleasant, and some of the darker material, I guess I want the entire world to know I wasn't having the greatest time talking about it, and I'm not a sicko.
No, I totally get that. And yes, it does go to very dark places. But I just even found it so fascinating how you developed Adrian's character, like the fact that he nails a hamburger to the wall and also doesn't like to shower. He likes his own body odor. He likes to smell.
Well, yeah. And go ahead, ask me a question about that. Shoot.
It's not a question about that. It's just.
Is it like, where did it come from?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Where do some of these details that form that create these characters come from, I guess?
Well, there's a lot of people out there. There's people. There's unusual people. I may have met some of them.
Absolutely. I want to talk about, I just want to remind the audience right now to start thinking about the questions you might have for Atticus and to put those into the question box at the bottom of the screen. I still have questions to ask Atticus, but you should start to think about those now and put them there so I can get to them shortly. I want to talk about how, Corey drops out of high school to help care for his mother, and during an argument about finishing his education, which she is so adamant about, she says there is more to life than being an HVAC installer. But to Corey, as you write, he says it was one of many paths to glory, all of which were equal: scholar, fighter, builder, farmer, sailor, poet, monk. All were equally good ways of getting to nirvana. I'm wondering how how manual labor and the people that Corey meets at these jobs shape him during his teenage years, because this was such a fascinating part of the book to me. I felt like you really, really captured what it was like for him when he's at these jobs, and also his relationship with a person who's sort of a father or uncle figure to him, Tom.
Well, I want to begin by my answer by saying that there's I really recall when I was a kid, my own mother was vacuuming, and she sort of, I was alone in the house with her, and she said, this is all I do. And I had read a lot of Zen or Japanese folk tales that about swordsmanship that referenced Zen. And I had picked up an idea from Zen that monks were trained by doing menial tasks. And I said to my mom, I didn't want her to feel bad about what she did. She felt she was wasting her time, her life. And I said, this may be a path to enlightenment, that if you do something that's menial or mindless, seemingly mindless, it's just like what you see. This is a part of Zen. It's actually part of the Eastern tradition. You see it in the Karate Kid. This is wax on, wax off. This is what Mr. Miyagi's talking about. And there are many forms of it. Especially in the martial arts traditions or the religious traditions, a new trainee would be given some utterly simple task, and it could be like wadding up paper or raking or something like that. And then years later, it would turn out that by doing this, they had acquired some great ability. Anyway, getting back to HVAC, there's something wrong to me about sneering at construction, for example, because it just seems wrong to me. So I think, how can I say this? Well, I don't know. That's just how I feel. So I think okay, I'll tell you something. Since we're doing a therapy session for me, I think I've just thought that I might have picked up at home a class bias against the working man, and I might have finally been getting my say about that. I think I recall my father once saying to me, "I'm not the kind of man who wears keys on his belt." And And I remember, it's funny why that should have upset me. It did. That bothered me. And I don't know exactly why, but clearly I began taking a side against that.
Yeah, absolutely. Were you really young when he said that? Do you remember? Was that something?
I was probably, I could ballpark it. I was young. I was like somewhere between 6 and 12 or something like that.
An impressionable age. Yeah. I want to talk about the way that you portray the relationship that Gloria has with Joan, who's an ex-lover of hers, and Joan moves back in after Gloria is diagnosed. And there's this wonderful passage in the chapter called The Year of Joan, where you write, with 2 women in the house, Corey sensed vortexes of emotion he didn't understand. Hidden turbines spin like a stack of washing machines under every wave traveling across the ocean to the shore. Thus were the currents of love between Gloria and Joan. Sometimes Corey was sure he felt rancor in the air, only to see them talking like old friends. He was often confused. And so in reading that passage, so much of this book is really a love story about a son fighting for his mother. And there's a side of Gloria that Corey could never truly know that Joan understands. And I'm wondering if this interested you as you worked on this book, of what was knowable and unknowable about her from her son's perspective.
That's a great question. Thank you. Look, I'll put it to you this way. The unknowable zone of a son's mother is a place that most sons don't want to know.
Yeah,
I think and I'm no exception. I would like my mother to have her privacy. You know what I mean? I don't want to intrude into the bedroom.
Right.
Okay? Yeah. In fact, one of the unfortunate things about caretaking, which I did a bit of, is that you have to see your mom do the functions of bathing and so on. I wasn't wild about that. It just had to be done. But yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Of course, but I'm talking even aside from parts of like sex and the body, just like being able to completely know who your mom is. You know, I guess I'm speaking about that as well.
Well, so would you ask me what you're asking me again one more time?
Yeah,
I don't mean to be a pain in the neck. I just
no.
There's a lot I could go with there, and I don't want to get myself in trouble.
Of course, I guess I'm asking about like whether that was something that interested you in exploring their relationship, that dichotomy on the page of Corey and Gloria, because it does seem like he knows her more than anyone in so many ways. But then there are, how much can you ever truly know your mom in some ways, right?
Yeah, I can answer this. For me, and it basically we're talking about me here because I was thinking for Corey when it came to his mom. For me, it really was an issue of knowing my mom. It was feeling a certain way about her. People have asked me questions about her lately, and I find myself at a loss to answer. There are lots of things I don't know about my mother. First of all, these events happened a long time ago. And it's been a long time since I've talked to the real mom, Barbara Lish. And then even when she was around, maybe it's a generational thing. She was born in the 30s. She didn't sit there and tell you everything that she was thinking.
Right.
And like me, I can't shut up. But so I don't think I really knew her that well. But yeah. I certainly had strong feelings about not wanting to see her tormented.
Of course. Early on in this novel, right before Gloria is diagnosed, she gets this surge of energy and starts writing an essay about a lot of things all at once. And you write in that part, it was all part of what she was exploring, her fear itself, going down to the root, to the fact that men can impregnate women, fill them full of shame, make them mutilate themselves, make them lie against themselves. And it's excruciating to read that part now, knowing what lies ahead for her, having read the book. But not long after that passage, you say, Leonard killed her with possibility. And that line just really stuck out to me a lot. And it seems to me like this book isn't just about the tragedy of her terminal illness, but also the tragedy of falling for a malicious man. And I'm wondering if you agree with that or what your thoughts are on that.
Well, yeah, I think that's what motivated me to write the book. What you want to see from your fellow human beings is that they compete, but they also help the people that they're with. So you're right. If somebody just struggles to aggrandize themselves and grinds to a pace the people who are close around them, that's not good. So I did feel that, well, I'll talk about Gloria. What I would have wanted in a better world for her would be that she would meet someone who would help her to overcome whatever barriers of let's say, a slight lack of confidence, maybe, there are many reasons for not going full tilt towards your goal. I mean, right. Really, this could apply to just about anybody, and everybody needs, most people need a bit of support from somewhere. And you don't want to see someone parasitize another person. If you get a predatory or vampiric personality who wants to suck the life force of someone else and leave a husk behind, guess who I'm thinking of? Imagine an editor who decides to alight like a bat on top of the work of Raymond Carver, eat out the insides of Raymond Carver's viscera, and then sort of stitch it together in a new fashion. You might create something fantastic. There's no question about it, but you have a soul murder on your conscience. So you don't want to see that happen to anyone. Yeah.
No, for sure. I'm wondering how you settled on the final structure for this book, because I also read that initially it was going in a different direction and you changed that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure can. Yeah, I floundered around in confusion for a long time. And most of the confusion was my own making. And I think it may have been a psychological defense. So what I did from the beginning was I had an ambition to turn this into an elaborate crime story. And so what I wound up with in the summer of 2020, I finished a version of the book that was probably quite a bit longer and had a lot of what you see here, but also sort of growing out the side of it was a sort of a, this other crime story that sort of tied to it like a succubus. It was in the way. And my editor, Jordan Pavlin, in July of 2020, got back to me having read it. And she said, look, you've got something here, but if you've got the energy, you really should lose the crime story. And so I got rid of it. And then once that was out of the way, you know how when you're playing around with Lego pieces, then the closer you get to the way something should look, it starts to answer those questions for you. I'm sure you've experienced that too. And so the puzzle pieces started to fit in and even almost arrange themselves at that point. And I experienced a huge relief once I had jettisoned my the dead weight of that extraneous story.
And then in terms of your actual writing process, do you feel like, do the characters come to you first, the story idea? Like what is usually the spark for you? It sounds like for here, the spark was your mother, your own mother, but is that correct? And from there, like how do you approach writing this story?
Well, I have to say again, I'm only a 2-book guy so far. So when you say, how do I usually do it? It's like,
the past 2 times.
No usually yet, right? But yes, I did start with Gloria, and then and I do think that's the way to go. I think I found out the hard way that for me, it's a mistake to begin with ideas. Whether those are philosophical ideas or plot ideas, hey, wouldn't it be a neat idea if you had a guy, like a premise? I don't think what I will try to do in the future is forget ideas, big or small, forget premises, big or small, and or no matter how clever, and instead really begin with a character. And I think what I visualize is if you watch your favorite Western movie, you always see a huge expanse of desert, and then there's a tiny speck that grows into a horseman, and then you can see who it is, and it's Clint Eastwood. Yeah. I mean, so you obviously want to start every novel with Clint Eastwood. That's pretty much what I'm saying.
Great writing advice there. Thank you. I think that I want to open this up to the audience now, and we already have some questions. So I'm going to read some of those questions to you. And the first one comes from Michael Riemann, who asks, did you feel that Corey's often unsuccessful search for a mentor is a sad one, or did you see it in a positive light?
Well, I don't think his search was entirely unsuccessful. I think I think the way real life has worked for me, for example, is that you get a little something from all kinds of different people, but you may not get everything from them. I think people may have remarked that Tom's character was inadequate as a surrogate dad for Corey, but Tom's got his own family, he's got his own job. I was sort of sympathetic to Tom, and he does give Corey something. And then Corey gets something else from Molly, and so you go along in life, I suppose, and you get a bit of insight here and a bit of insight there. And so I didn't. Short answer: I did not see his story as sad or unsuccessful. I actually think I think it's like everybody's story. It's an ongoing story. Okay, I mean, as I sit here before you, I've just finished something. It's what we're talking about. Well, life has to go on. I got to do something new, and so do you, and so does she, and so and we're all still learning. So I think, well, still learning. Hopefully, I hope I'm still learning and not freezing in one place. So and nobody knows everything, and so Corey's really the same way. He's in the same predicament we all are, just going along, getting a bit of wisdom along the way as he goes.
Yes. So this question comes from Jennifer Lish, who asks, what makes Leonard incapable of perceiving Corey as a child and as his own child? What makes Leonard react to Corey as a threat and an adversary instead of as a child who is hurting home he should nurture?
That's an excellent question. I would say that there's a competitiveness there. In the case of Corey and Leonard, I think it has something to do with Corey being male. Okay, I think there's a guy thing going on there. It's not supposed to happen that way. You would want a father to have enough sense of himself that he isn't threatened by a kid. You would want, and so this relates. Okay, this relates to the issue of why male confidence is not a bad thing, because it creates enough serenity in the man so that he can then be benevolent. If a man has to struggle at every turn to prove himself and he feels embattled all the time, he becomes an SOB, and right. So a little bit of success and a sense of having climbed your mountain and of being to hold your own with your peers is actually a very useful thing, both for the individual man and I think for anybody around him, for his family, for his society, because otherwise you can really wind up being a bit dangerous to people because everything's a threat. I think that's what's going on with a guy like Leonard. I think a guy like Leonard is competitive with his with kids. That's what I really think.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the movie Prefontaine. Where Prefontaine's an Olympic runner, and he goes on an exhibition where his girlfriend's with him, and he goes on an exhibition run with some kids who are like from the Boy Scouts or kindergarten or camp or something. They're just little kids, and he won't let the kids beat him. And his girlfriend takes him to task. She says, "What's the matter with you?" And Prefontaine says, "Listen, I'm a guy with one leg slightly shorter than the other, and I'm an Olympic runner. I only got here by being incredibly competitive, so competitive, I won't even let a kid beat me." So there's really a trade-off between being decent to people who are around you and also your ambition. And I don't think there's a clear answer either way. It's a matter of balance that one hopes to strike in life.
Absolutely. It looks like Michael Ryman had a comment in response to your answers, which is that Corey saw Leonard's selfishness. Leonard took the car that Gloria really needed without a thought for her. And that's true. That moment was so upsetting when that happened.
I agree.
Yeah. I want to ask the next question from the audience, from Karen Smith. I was stunned by the beauty of your writing in preparation for the next life, which surprised me in a way because the subject matter and the lives of your characters were so tough, and because I expected the book would be more for a male reader. Listening to you now talk about fighting is also making me think I am not your intended audience, yet I can't wait to read The War for Gloria. Do you consider reader reactions to your work while you are writing?
Well, no, I don't, because, you pointed out before this Zoom interview that this, it used to be when we went to a bookstore to do a book event, there would just be the people in the store. This Zoom event could potentially be beaming out to ISIS right now. I mean, we could be covering the entire world. Sorry for referring to ISIS during this sacred moment. But anyway, my point is that if you're reaching 9 million bazillion people, you can't possibly figure out what's going to satisfy each one. You can't even satisfy 5 people at one time. So my feeling is that, and this is what I do, I only think about what I want when I'm writing, the story that I would like to read. And I really don't think about it from the standpoint of what a guy would like, what a girl would like, I don't think about it about demographics. Like, am I going to reach guys over 50? I don't specifically care about them. I just try to write something that I would enjoy. And this really relates to the subject that we opened with, not only something that I would enjoy, but something that I would feel viscerally engaged by. And I think that's the best guide to possibly grabbing other people's attention too, because we do have a lot in common.
Absolutely. And before I ask this other audience question, that actually makes me want to know, what are some of the books that do that for you, aside from your own books? Like what books really speak to you as a reader and a writer?
Thank you. I just read a terrific book by Victoria Shore called The Plum Trees. It is about the Holocaust. And it is rare in my experience that somebody writes powerful fiction about the Holocaust. It is powerful fiction about the Holocaust. I would say that it is companion reading to The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which is most definitely not fiction. I listened to that on Audible during the spring, and then I stumbled upon The Plum Trees in the Lexington, Kentucky Public Library, where I was in Lexington, where I was living at the time, and just absolutely fell in love with the book. It's beautifully written, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. It's and most of all, it manages to be chilling in a way that I don't think most writing about the death camps manages to be, because when you talk about statistics, things sort of turn gray, but this turns it into, I mean, you can feel it as a horror story. You can feel it as a story of murder. And that's brilliant. So there's an example of a book that really meant a lot to me. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to definitely read that. I haven't heard of it before, and I'm excited to check that out. So we have a question here from Tim Horvath, and I just want to remind the audience that if anyone else has any other questions, you should submit that now. Tim is a wonderful writer himself, and he asks, one thing I admire so much about preparation for the next life is how much you accomplish in stretches without much interiority, where the relentless attention to detail, action, and scene create, almost paradoxically, a kind of intimacy. It feels as though we enter their lives and worlds fully. Based on the admittedly few glimpses I've had of the new novel, it feels as though there's a bit more space for characters to reflect, contemplate, grapple internally. I wonder if this was a conscious strategy or just how each work emerged and what the challenges and joys of each approach might be.
I really appreciate that question. It's really perceptive and it hits the nail on the head. So thank you. Yes, preparation, I was able to pretty much paint from life. I would go out on the streets and pretty much write what I saw right outside my door. For this book, it felt like a psychological book. I was working from memory, and I didn't have that kind of material. So I worked with what I had, and a lot of it, I guess, was people's thoughts. So yeah, I just felt that it made it a different book. So I think that just yeah, it wasn't a conscious strategy. It was forced on me by the nature of the material.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that we have reached the end. There are no more audience questions. So I just want to say thank you, Atticus. It's been such an honor to talk to you and to read this incredible book. And I want everyone to go out and buy this from Community Bookstore and read this book and tell their friends and loved ones about it. I think this is a masterpiece that you've written. So thank you.
Thank you so very much for saying that. It's been a true pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, community.
And thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Atticus. This was a really fantastic, engaging, wonderful conversation. And thank you to all of you at home for your really thoughtful questions. Please do, everyone, consider purchasing a copy of The War for Gloria from Community Bookstore, and we do hope to see you at another virtual event soon. Thanks again, Atticus and Michele, for joining us, and everyone have a great evening. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.